I'm going to talk about 5 albums that I know that Lenny would not, I won't say be interested in, but just he would just sit here and So I let him go do what he needs to do right now, and I'm going to kick it off with an album from 1981 by Alan Parsons called "Turn of a Friendly Card." Now, I'm a big Alan Parsons fan, and it's kind of like a lot of bands do. They put a trilogy of albums together. And for me, for Alan Parsons, it's I, Robot, Pyramid, and Eve. This album here was kind of the beginning of the uh-oh stage that some of us go through in bands that we like career. And the uh-oh is, I don't know about this one. And I mean, this had had Time, which was kind of, and Games People Play, which really wasn't that bad, but it was an alright album. And this is one of those albums where you're like kind of like, all right, well the next one will be The Decision, and the next one for Alan Parsons was Eye in the Sky, which I checked out after that. I bought that album. I was just kind of like, oh, this is like so. It was boring. It went nowhere. Now, mind you, down the road, Alan Parsons albums like Ammonia Avenue and all that stuff, things we'll get into later on, got better again. But once you're lost from a band, there's other bands that when you're a kid, when you're younger, that you're going to spend your money on. So next up, Mob Rules Black Sabbath. While I do not consider this as good as Heaven and Hell, I still consider it an album that has Ronnie James Dio singing on it, and Ronnie James Dio's voice is absolutely amazing. So, I mean, if this was an album of children's classics sung by Ronnie James Dio that was released in 1981, it would be on my list. I mean, Turn Up the Night, Mob Rules, I think Southern Cross is on this one also. I mean, it's not that it's bad. I mean, these two albums, I would just, now I know that recently, before Ronnie James Dio passed away, they did Heaven and Hell sort of as a band thing and toured with this, and they did the 2 albums. But I did get this fortunate to see Ronnie James Dio on the Heaven and Hell tour, and that gave me an appreciation for Black Sabbath, because I was not a fan of Ozzy's voice until they started tweaking it during the Ozzy solo era. So next up, Grand Funk Lives. If you've watched this show, you know that I'm a big Grand Funk Railroad fan. This album here was, it wasn't the Grand Funk of the early days where it was heavier and all that. This was more the Grand Funk of like American Band, Shining On, and All the Girls in the World Beware. If this album was released in, I would say, 1974, 75, there would probably be about 4 or 5 hits off of this album. And when this album came out and I got it and I listened to it, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is great. They're gonna get a resurgence in their career. It went nowhere. There's a song Stuck in the Middle with You, I Can't Be With You Tonight, and they do a great version of We Gotta Get Out of This Place, if it's the last thing we ever do. And I was pumped. When I got the album, I listened to it, I'm like, yeah, this is, and just, it was DOA. And, at that time, money was going to other bands and music and their promo and all that stuff. But if you're a Grand Funk fan, I would search this album. It's a hard one to find. Maybe like look it up on YouTube and just play it on YouTube on your on your system. Definitely worth it. So now the next 2 albums are more geared to musicians. These are 2 musician-oriented albums that came out in 1981 that I just think are absolutely fantastic. This one, Discipline by King Crimson. Now, while I like the first album of King Crimson with Greg Lake, and I also enjoyed when John Anderson sat in with Prince Rupert Awakes on the Lizard album, King Crimson was not everybody's cup of tea. And when this came out, this was like one of the most awesome semblances. I mean, you have the Bruford, Wakeman, Chris Squire, Steve Howe, John Anderson era of Yes. You've got Return to Forever with Chick Corea, Al Di Meola, Stanley Clarke, and I believe it was Lenny White on drums. And then you have this version of King Crimson, which was Robert Fripp, Adrian Belew, Tony Levin on bass, and Bill Bruford on drums. This album here had Elephant Talk, it had Frame by Frame, and Indiscipline, where when I'm nervous I repeat myself. Now, when this album first came out in 1981, it was under my radar. I didn't listen to it. I was in other things. And I think it was about 3 or 4 years later when either the Laserdisc came out or it was on VHS. It was a bootleg or whatever. There was a live concert of this version of King Crimson in Japan, and I didn't know all the songs. And when I was watching it, it's like I think Frame by Frame, I think they were talking about, has 1/64th notes in it, and the time signatures are just weird. But when you could see a band, as a musician, it might not necessarily be about the song. When you see a band doing these things, and all of a sudden stop on a dime, and then pick up, and then stop, and do all that stuff. Look for these songs on YouTube, the live versions, because it doesn't matter if you like the song, if you're going to put, because this might not be the album that you put on it and listen to, but Frame by Frame is really good. And again, Elephant Talk and Indiscipline. So anyway, my last album. Again, this goes more to guitar players. This is a great album, and it's called Friday Night Vinyl in San Francisco. Unfortunately, no, it's Friday Night in San Francisco. I know, you saw what I did there. If Lenny was here right now over here, he would be throwing up. But Friday Night in San Francisco is a live album with Al Di Meola, John McLaughlin, and Paco de Lucia. Now, these three guys are sitting there on acoustic guitar doing like flamenco style, just crazy stuff. And the cool thing is the album will tell you, in stereo, it'll tell you Al Di Meola's in this speaker, John McLaughlin's in this speaker, and the center mode is Paco de Lucia. And if you're a guitar player, first off, if you're my age and you're a guitar player and you haven't heard of this album, what the hell? But this is one of the best guitar playing albums I've ever heard, because they're on acoustic. There's no effects, there's no echo, delay, distortion, things that can make it sound anything more than just clean acoustic guitar. So that's my my 5 albums for here, and I hope you enjoyed them. And that's my cue. We're gonna go back to Lenny.